Welcome to Ag Matters, covering positive agriculture stories from across Alaska on Big Cabbage Radio.
Hello, everybody. You're listening to Ag Matters. I'm your host, Ken Hoffman. I'm a farmer out here in Palmer, so I know some things about agriculture, and I'm also the executive director of the Alaska Farm Bureau. If anybody wants to learn more about what Farm Bureau is and what we do, you could always visit our website at alaskafb.org, or you could always email me as well directly. It's matsufarmbureau@gmail.com. All right, we have somebody in the studio today from Palmer Brewing Co. Thanks for coming in.
You bet. I'm happy to be here.
All right, so if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself to the listeners and telling us what you do, how you got into Alaska, and how you got into brewing.
Sure. Well, my name is Frank Bell. As far as how I got into Alaska, I was born here in 1986 in the small town of Anchorage. Moved out to the valley with my wife in 2017, but been coming out here my whole life.
Good choice.
As far as brewing, I pretty much got into craft beer. Well, statute of limitations is probably gone when I was in college, so for a couple years. And then when I turned 21, I started home brewing and fell in love with it, and basically the rest is history, I guess, as they say.
Yeah. So Palmer Brewing Co. Is there a physical location where you're at, or are you just brewing from home?
Nope, it's a physical location, so we're at 650 East Steel Loop over there by the fairgrounds in the industrial park. Yep.
Okay. I knew Arcos Brewing was over there.
Correct, yeah. So Arcos, the owners of Arcos decided to get out of the business. Due to population limits associated with those licenses, the only way to get one in populated areas, including Palmer, but especially Anchorage, is through a transfer. Mm-hmm. So when that opportunity showed up, and being about the right age for a midlife crisis, I decided to bail out of my old job, acquire those licenses, and start a new brewery there. So we purchased their equipment in place. Obviously, we've done our own sort of modifications to what was there, and to kind of utilize it how we want to utilize it, and the building as well. So we are doing a full kind of remodel of the tap room and everything else also. So
exciting stuff. So you're in the Springer system near the fairgrounds.
Yep.
So I'm looking at your logo right now. That makes sense now that you have barns and silos and Pioneer Peak. It has that farming look.
Yeah, the barn is actually our building. So that's a silhouette of the building itself.
Okay, cool.
Yep. And then Pioneer Peak is located pretty much where you see it there on the logo. And we're pretty much surrounded by farmland, with the exception of a few others in the industrial park there. So we decided to just make our logo indicative of the place.
Yeah, beautiful. So tell us about your products. When did you start producing products, and where can you buy them?
We can't buy them yet. So we started this whole process in about February and closed on the equipment in the building in June. Unfortunately, the state of Alaska timeline for license transfers is pretty extensive. So we actually just got our brewery manufacturers and brewery retail license about 2 weeks ago. So until then, we could not produce any product. But since then, we've been brewing like mad.
Okay.
But we got to get test batches all completed and evaluated before we actually start selling product to consumers and start distributing it. Every system is different. It's not as simple as taking a 5-gallon homebrew batch or even a recipe from another system and converting it to a new one. Every system has its idiosyncrasies and takes a little bit of time. So you want to make sure you brew test batches of each one. Some will need a little tinkering. Some will probably be close enough that we can make small adjustments and have a marketable product. But as of right now, we're just trying to get tanks full with test batches, evaluate those as we complete them. And then once we're confident we have enough products that we would buy ourselves.
Yeah.
So once we get it into the range that we're confident to put it out in the market, we will. I'm hesitant to give out a perfect timeline on that. So I'll say optimistically late November, early December.
Okay.
We'd probably be open to the public and start selling product. Pessimistically, February. We'd push it to February if we can't hit December. We don't want to open in dry January.
No.
Every brewery and bottle shop sees a pretty significant dip in January and October.
That seems to be the case just in all retail. Everyone's trying to heal from Christmas, not spend any money, be healthy. Yeah,
exactly.
That's
so
January.
We'll push it to February 1 if we get that late, and people can ring in the end of dry January.
Yeah.
A new brewery to visit.
Valentine's Day.
Yep, there you
go. Okay, so when you say we are working on this, who's part of the we?
As of right now, it's myself, and I did bring on a head brewer. His name is Jeremiah Boone. He's brewed in the past. He was head brewer at Midnight Sun for a while. He brewed at Anchorage Brewing Company over there with Gabe Fletcher, and then brewed at King Street Brewing as well for a while.
Okay, so he knows his stuff.
Yeah, exactly. I'm confident in my recipes. I've won every homebrew award there is to win in the state of Alaska, but it's a whole different ballgame when you're brewing on a big system. And with the capacity we have, a one-man operation, you'd be grinding yourself to the bone every single day.
Yeah.
So having a second person in there. And then pretty soon here, we'll be bringing on a taproom manager as well once we get a little bit closer to opening. The individual that is slated to take that position has a lot of experience in packaging, so canning beer, as well as taproom attendance and other things. So we kind of have basically 3 people that can do a little bit of everything, just so we can kind of swap out, these 2 package this day, these 2 package the next day, and we're all doing a little bit of everything.
Okay. So when you're open to the public, does that mean that people can come in and taste your beer?
Yep, absolutely. We have a tap room there. We've done a pretty extensive remodel on it, which we're just about finishing. Can't tell you how thrilled I am to be done with that process. Just between that and now brewing and everything related to the business itself, my time is getting pretty thin. So now that the tap room's almost done, that opens up a little bit more time to get everything else done before opening. So we have a tap room there, and out of the gate we'll have food trucks and everything.
Okay.
To enjoy some food as well. So.
Okay, excellent. So how many product SKUs do you have coming out? Like how many different types of beer do you plan on having in your initial launch?
On our initial launch, we'd like to have all 16 taps flowing.
16?
Yeah, we have 16. Well, I should say 15 actually. One tap we keep open for CO2 to purge our crowlers. So just to purge the oxygen out of the can before you seal the crowler up. And then a couple of those will be devoted to local NA products. We're hoping to get some kombucha on from 203 or something like that, or maybe some Bleeding Heart soda or something. We may make our own soda too, but you got to have a few NA options kicking around for people that are either driving or people want to visit with their kids. That's
exactly.
Enjoy 13, 14 beers, something like that.
And you guys are making all 13, 14, or are you going to bring on other people's?
No, we'll have some NA beer available there in cans out of the gate. The NA space is definitely something we want to explore as we move forward. It's the fastest growing craft beer style in 2024. It's consuming a larger and larger part of the market. Whether that's going to be a wave that eventually crests and rolls back, like the seltzer wave kind of did, but it's going to be here to stay at least for a little while. But that requires pasteurization, some other equipment. It's a little bit more complex. There's a couple different ways you can do it, but right now we're focused on good old-fashioned alcoholic beer, and we'll go from there.
I'm familiar with mocktails, the non-alcoholic cocktails, and they've been pretty popular.
Yep, and people are doing that at breweries now too, because you can brew seltzer and stuff now, and seltzer gives you a pretty wide range as far as mocktails and stuff like that. There's also beer cocktails, beer mimosas and stuff like that, and bloody beer, all those kinds of things that people like. And we'll definitely be doing some of that as well, but obviously we're limited in the fact that we can't sell hard alcohol, so the cocktail mocktails will be a little more limited than they would be at your typical bar, but we will have them.
So why can't you sell hard alcohol? Is that a different license?
Yep, different license. So that would be a beverage dispensary license, which is typically what a bar has. We operate under a brewery manufacturer's license and a brewery retail license. Okay. And we have a sampling endorsement, so we can do flights and samples and stuff like that as well.
So you have 13 or 14 different products. What are your favorite ones? Can you tell the folks out here what they can look forward to?
Yeah, definitely. As far as personal favorites, that's kind of the situation. People always throw out the cliche. It's like asking which kid is your favorite. Yeah. One thing that we feel there's a space for more in the state of Alaska in particular is really high quality lager. Lager is a tough beer to brew. It's kind of counterintuitive. Most people would think a lager would be simple because it's a fairly simple tasting product, right? There's a lot of nuance in lager, and the brewing process is significantly more extensive than it is for an ale. There are breweries, certainly almost all breweries in Alaska make lager, but we feel there's a hole in the market for really high quality lager that's done in a little bit more traditional way. Okay. It takes longer, it's harder to do, so production breweries tend to, I'm just trying to be tactful here, expedite the process a little bit. Yeah. There are certain techniques you can do, but in our opinion, the resulting product, you can tell. And there are some breweries that are making great lager here too. I don't want to say that nobody is, but I think it's a space that will increase, and the market in general, market trends in the United States for craft beer is pointing towards more drinkable, more reliable styles, and so lagers have been coming on strong the last couple of years, taking up more and more of that.
What do you mean drinkable and reliable?
Lower ABV, so stuff that's not humongous.
What's that? ABV?
Stuff in the 4%, 5% range.
Okay.
Whereas things like Imperial Stouts, double IPAs, bigger Belgian styles will typically be 8, 9, 10, sometimes 13, 14% ABV. And particularly barrel-aged versions of that were really popular for 10 years probably through the craft beer wave that kind of took over in the early 2000s. But in the last few years, some attribute it to Gen Z, some attribute it to more health consciousness, but lower ABV drinkable styles that are very reliable have become more and more popular in the last few years. And lager fits right into that.
Really?
There are high ABV lagers out there, but the vast majority of them are going to be in the 4 to 5.5% range.
Okay. So you keep throwing out the term craft beer. So I know nothing about alcohol.
Sure.
I know there's beer, there's wine, there's spirits. But in the beer area, what's different between a normal beer and a craft beer?
Well, craft beer is kind of a catch-all term, and you'll hear some other catch-all terms thrown around like microbrewery, craft brewery, artisan ales, things like that. It basically just means, for lack of a more broad definition,
Not Budweiser.
Smaller batches, yeah, exactly, not huge. And then now there's people throw out the term regional brewery also, which companies like Alaskan Brewing or New Belgium Brewing, several others that are brewing a lot of craft beer, but doing it on a humongous scale. So we would generally refer to those as regional breweries.
Okay.
Craft brewery, typically, I think it's not a government definition, but a microbrewery is like 15,000 barrels or less.
Oh, okay.
So in that neighborhood. But yeah, craft brewery is just kind of a catch-all for something that's, like you said, not Budweiser.
Yeah. Okay, so could you give us a little primer on the different kinds of beers? You say lager, I've heard of ale, there's stouts, there's ports, there's all these different things. Could you give us kind of a nice primer on that?
Sure. The main two categories you're going to hear, like you said, is lager and ale, which basically means top fermenting yeast or bottom fermenting yeast. And the difference is really in process with those. So I'm going to get a little bit complex here for you. If that, hopefully I don't bore your listeners too much. But ale, you would do a single infusion mash at 155 degrees, ish, depending on style. Sparge on top of that. Boil and ferment for 7 days or so, 5 to 7 days for primary fermentation, and another 7 days for secondary at around 68 degrees. Lager, traditionally, you would do something called a decoction mash for most lagers, which involves multiple steps and reheating a portion of the mash itself, and then reuniting that with the original mash to bring temperatures up in steps, so 122, 146, 162, sparge at 170, boil, and then you're going to ferment significantly lower. So most lagers will be in the neighborhood of 50 degrees for primary fermentation. As a result, it'll take longer. So you'll have a probably 10 to 14 day primary, and then you'll bring it up a little bit for a diacetyl rest for 2 days, and then come back down about a degree or two per day till you get it down to lagering temp at 32, 33 degrees, and it'll typically sit there for 4 to 8 weeks depending on the style before it's ready to carbonate and package. Lagers are also more complex because you really can't hide behind anything. The base malt is super thin. There's not a lot of specialty grain, so any flaw that comes out, whether that's DMS, diacetyl, H2S, metallic, it will show in a lager. So the process has to be really, really tight. A more general definition, lagers are lighter in body. Typically well carbonated, easy drinking. Lager is what most people think of when they think of beer. Which is lagers on a 700-year winning streak when it comes to a preferred style, because all your American lagers, like the Budweiser you mentioned earlier, European lager, Germany, the Czech Republic, the UK lager is the number one consumed style. And there are a lot of different styles of lager.
So an ale is a bit heavier.
A little bit heavier body. I mean, there's some kinds of ale that have a lighter body as well, Belgian Saison, stuff like that. You can get really, really dry with. But yeah, generally speaking, ales will have a little bit higher finishing gravity than a lager would.
Okay, so it sounds like you have to be a scientist and an artist.
A little bit, yeah. And by no means do I claim to be the scientist in the building. Jeremiah is definitely much more on top of that. But you can get into all kinds of stuff with alpha amylase, beta amylase, enzymes, alpha acids and hops, lupulin, cell counts in yeast. We're messing around with hydrometers and pH meters and all that kind of fun stuff. So
aren't hops and lupulins related?
Yeah, lupulin is basically just if you cut a hop open, you'll see these little yellow sort of crystally looking things inside the bud, and that's kind of what you're looking for. And
so another beer term I've heard is IPA. What is that?
India Pale Ale. Most people, when they hear that for the first time, it's why on earth would it be called India Pale Ale? But it's typically associated with a really heavy hop presence.
Hops.
Hoppy. Lots and lots of hops. And the reason it's called India Pale Ale is in the UK, during British colonialism in India, they would ship beer by the barrel to India, which was a long, long journey because it was going by boat. So they would put additional hop presence in there. Hops fade fairly quickly in beer styles. Most IPAs, you'd prefer people to consume them within 2 or 3 months. So when they're brewed, ideally the next day, because that hop profile will slowly fade. So when they were sending their usual English bitters or ESBs, by the time they got to India, the hop presence would be very muted and it wouldn't taste right. So they basically packed it with more hops. Yep. And then when things crossed the pond in craft brewing, brewers, particularly on the West Coast, took that idea and really blew it to bejesusville. So they started just loading what were pale ales up with massive amounts of hops, much higher alpha acid hops than UK hops too, which is going to result in more bitter flavor.
So what's the history of hops? Did people originally do it for the flavor, or is there some sort of chemical that comes with the hops that helps?
So it's a couple things. Yeah, flavor obviously is a big part of it, but hops also have somewhat of a preservative effect. People were brewing beer long before they knew that boiling water made it safe. In fact, they would brew a small beer for kids to drink on the farm. So they would basically just run water through the mash after they took the first beer off and produce a beer that was 1.5–2% ABV because people could drink it and not get sick.
Yeah.
And hops do protect a little bit. I don't want to overstate that level of protection, but from infection from various things, there's all kinds of different things that can infect beer. One of the biggest parts is being super, super sanitary. A lot of brewers will tell you you're basically like a janitor that can drink on the job, because it's 90% of what they're doing every day is making sure that everything the beer touches after the boil is fully clean, fully sanitized.
Yeah.
So hops do have a little bit of a preservative effect that help against that infection, but now with modern technology and modern products, we take additional steps to make sure that everything is sanitary.
Okay, sounds good. So since this is Alaska Ag Matters, we try to keep it on the topic of Alaska grown. Are there any ingredients that you use that are semi-local or that you want to source locally?
Yeah, certainly. There are people that grow hops here. Most of them, it's just for fun. And
Really?
Yeah, but we do want to try and figure out a way to use some local hops if we can.
That'd be so cool.
It's a tall order. But other than that, there is some rye grain grown right here in the valley that we can utilize in beer. Obviously, in Delta, there's Delta barley and different adjuncts and stuff like that we can utilize. If you're going to put something more than just malted barley, water, hops, and yeast into a beer, there's myriad options for local adjunct products to add to a beer.
So what are some examples that you can think
all
of?
Kinds of,
blueberries?
Yeah, coffee, any kind of berries you can do, especially with sour beer or wheat beers. Berries are a very popular addition. Coffee, chocolate, there's literally anything that
Coffee?
Oh, absolutely.
I've never heard of that one.
Oh, yeah, coffee porters, coffee imperial stouts, dark beers in particular. Coffee is a wide choice. There's actually a style of beer that's kind of catching on called white stout, which doesn't make any sense, but white stouts try to mimic the flavor of a stout, but with a clear beer.
See, I'm trying to keep up with you. What's a stout?
Stout. So a stout's basically a super beefy porter. So
porter.
Like the first thing most people think of when they think of stout is Guinness, right?
Okay.
So Guinness was actually marketing their product under the name of porter until about the mid 1800s. They started brewing an extra stout porter, and they eventually just dropped the porter off of that and called it Guinness Extra Stout.
Porter a brand?
No, porter's a style as well.
It's a style. Yep. Is it under ale or lager?
Ale.
Ale,
yeah,
okay.
Both would be ales. So stout's just kind of like a porter, similar profile, but you're going to have a heavier roasted malt profile, maybe a little heavier body, and typically it'll be more opaque. Porters, if you hold a light up to a porter, you can kind of see a ruby glow through there. Stouts are almost always predominantly opaque, especially bigger, like imperial stouts are humongous. And there's a whole story behind the name of that. That involves beer travel as well to Russia. But
wow. So I'm just trying to think through all of my experiences with beer. What about the big can that has like the nitro thing in the middle
nitro
of it?
widget?
Yeah, what is that?
It just nitrogenates the beer instead of carbonating it. So you get a silkier mouthfeel, a little bit less of that fizzy character, and you'll get that really small bubbles on the head. So it's a very popular choice for things like stouts. And we do have a nitro tap.
Oh, really?
Most breweries do these days have a nitro tap as well. But that little thing in the Guinness can is just a widget that when you crack it, it just nitrogenates the beer.
I always thought that was fascinating.
It is, yeah. And if you look at the quantities on those beers, typically you would see like 16.9 ounces in those cans, and the Guinness ones, you'll see it's actually a little bit smaller because of the space that widget takes up in there.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, let's go back on topic of the Alaska grown products. Yep. So what other maybe local like berries or fruits could you use in a...
Literally anything. I mean, berries are a popular choice. There are some people that have explored the vegetable space. As you can see, locally here, Bleeding Heart Brewery puts locally grown beets in their IPA.
Oh, yeah,
beets. Beet IPA. But yeah, I mean, the options are endless. To keep it on the ag thing, one thing that's kind of cool with most local breweries, ours included, is the spent grain typically goes to feed local livestock. So you're a farmer, you probably know John DePriest over there. Yep. So his Angus cattle, he comes and gets our spent grain for that. We also give a little bit of our spent grain to local bakeries that will make spent grain bread. Yeah, and just really anyone that wants to come grab a little bit of spent grain, they can. But farms are great because they'll take it all and feed it to their cows, which is a great use for it. We'd much prefer to do that than dump it in the dumpster, mostly because limits waste, but also because a dumpster's only so big and we have a lot of spent grain coming out of there every day.
Okay, so say when you open your tap room, what are the top 5 that you think that people in Palmer should really try?
Well, we're hoping that we'll be pretty proud of our lagers, as I mentioned before. So we'll be brewing a Czech Pilsner, a Helles lager, a Vienna lager for sure. Those will go out as flagships most likely.
Yeah.
We'll be brewing additional kinds of lager as well, Schwarz beers, Zwickel beer, any kind of lager. We'll take a stab at it. I'm just speaking Greek to you.
Yeah, this is cool.
But IPA, certainly you have to have a solid IPA. It's just a really popular style now. So a West Coast IPA and a hazy IPA, which is actually what we're brewing this morning, will be on tap as well. A porter. We'll do some barrel-aged imperial stouts, definitely some barrel-aged barley wines, mostly because we love the style. A lot of people do, but also because Great Alaska Beer and Barley Wine Festival, we want to be able to enter and try and get some fancy gold.
What festival? What is this festival?
Great Alaska Beer and Barley Wine Festival.
Oh, when's that and where is it?
Typically it's in January and it's in Anchorage. Recent years, I think it's been at the Denina Center. It used to be at the Egan, but it's the biggest beer festival in the state.
Really?
Yeah. And there are awards for barley wine and for quote-unquote winter warmer, which is pretty much a catch-all style for strong ale. So you can enter barley wine or whatever in there.
Barley wine, what's that?
It's kind of a misnomer. It's just a really strong ale in origins in the UK as well. So there's English style barley wine and American style barley wine. English style barley wine would typically be a ton of Maris Otter base malt and not much else. So super strong, anywhere from 8 to 20% ABV. One of the more famous ones here in Alaska out of Anchorage Brewing, Deal with the Devil's like a 17% ABV barley wine. And then American style barley wines are similar, but you most likely have a 2-row base and a lot bigger hop profile in those. So they're basically like a quadruple IPA with a huge malt profile, essentially. But the world's kind of trending towards English style barley wines mostly nowadays, but very popular for putting in bourbon barrels, rye barrels, and adding a little barrel character, since you're not going to hide the alcohol in that beer anyway. So adding a little barrel character doesn't hurt.
Wow. So after you open the tap room, do you have any goals for having distributors have your cans?
Yeah, definitely. So that our brewery, with the location we're in, distribution is a pretty essential part of the business model. It's not a terribly taproom friendly location. Obviously, we want to drive as much taproom traffic as we can, and any brewery's margins are better in the taproom than they are through distribution, significantly so. But yeah, just being where we are and the capacity we have, distribution is going to be a key part of it. So we do have a canning line that we brought on, and we'll be canning in mostly 16-ounce 4-packs. Some of the bigger stuff might go into 12-ounce cans. We have chucks for both on our canning line. And then specialty batches, like I mentioned, barrel-aged imperial stouts or barley wines or barrel-aged sours, saisons, stuff like that. Anything coming out of a barrel, we have a 2-head 22-ounce bottling line that we'll use for those with wax dip caps and stuff, because some people like to age those beers for a few years before popping them open. Some beers will smooth out a little bit with age. So
I feel like I just went through a college class on beers.
You could if you wanted to. There's UC Davis or the Siebel Institute. There's German schools, quite a bit. You can essentially get a degree in fermentation science or brewing. Oregon State has a good fermentation science program. So there's always more to learn. Well, you could live your whole life studying brewing.
How did you learn everything? YouTube and books?
Well, I started brewing before YouTube was really that much of a thing. A lot of books, early on, and just the Great Northern Brewers Club in Anchorage is a local homebrew club. But it was much bigger then than it is now. Homebrewing's kind of decreased in popularity in recent years, but just passed down knowledge from other brewers. You know, those meetings, I mean, not just the homebrewing community, but the professional brewing community is a very mutually supportive industry. So,
really?
For the most part, obviously, I'm speaking generally, but you could walk into your competitor's building and say, hey, I'm short on Vienna malt or whatever. Do you guys got a bag and grab? Also, have you ever used a spunding valve? What's your experience with it? Blah, blah, blah. We have an issue with our pump. Have you ever dealt with that? And most of the time, they're perfectly happy to help. It's a super friendly industry, which is part of what we love about it. So.
All right. Well, your digital presence, do you have a website, social media, Instagram? How can people follow so that when you announce your opening of your tap room, people can show up?
Yep. So right now we're on Instagram and Facebook. We had to hop on a little earlier than we wanted to. There was not much of an announcement when Arcos closed. So as we were remodeling, we kept having customers walk in with empty growlers expecting to fill beer. So we had to put a sign up basically saying what's going on. And of course, somebody took a picture of it and put it on Facebook. So we had to jump on. But we are on Instagram at Palmer Brewing and then Facebook, Palmer Brewing Company. We are currently building out our website. We're going to launch that a little closer to opening because we will be selling merch through the website.
Oh, cool.
And we don't want to hop on and start selling merch too early and have everybody get all excited and then forget about us before we open. So, and also building out a website is a heck of a process when you're doing it yourself. It's a lot, and we also just need, photography up there. So we want to get our taproom remodel finished, so we have good pictures of that and pictures of our actual beer in our actual glasses and stuff like that. So, but yeah, as we get closer, 2-3 weeks before we open, probably we'll launch the website, which is www.palmerbrewing.com.
Well, cool. Well, thank you so much for coming in. Do you have any last word for our listeners?
Drink local beer.
Awesome.
Doesn't matter who. If you're going to want to drink Bleeding Heart, Matanuska, Palmer, if you're in the Palmer area, drink local beer. I mean, obviously we want people to drink our beer too.
Yep.
But, small brewers are going through a market restructuring right now. So there's never been a more important time to drink local, and you'll get a better product. You might pay a little bit more for it than you would for your Budweiser, but you're going to have myriad options that are made by people right here in town, using as much local ingredients as we can, giving back to the community. So if you want to support community involvement and drink a better product, drink local.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Frank.
You bet.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Ag Matters, covering positive agriculture stories from across Alaska on Big Cabbage Radio. Ag Matters is a production of Radio Free Palmer, recorded at our studios in Palmer, Alaska. For more information about this program, email manager@radiofreepalmer.org.